Happy New Year.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Welcome aboard. I don't know how many days into January you're allowed to say Happy New Year. But I'm going to say it to you because it's our original program, first original program for 2019. And I'm just so happy to be back to work, you know, a couple of weeks. I got something to say about... All right, and so does Nesi all the time. So Ted Nesi is here, which is a great way to start the new year because, you know, we tend to be somewhat legislatively focused. You know, I often wonder, I wonder what Ted thinks about this. I haven't asked him this question, but I often wonder about other states in America and whether they have as much state house centricity, you know, to the culture. The truth of the matter is I don't think so. You know, I've lived in other places, and it's not necessarily the thing that happens around here. But the interesting dynamic of that is that while we're media pretty focused on it, the rest of the state's kind of like blah, 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 as evidenced by empty chairs galore on a warmer, windy day for the inauguration this past weekend. Let's just check in on what's happening in the world. The government is still shut down, at least 1/3 of it. Headline here. Eric, we have that? Yes. It's as simple as that. And Democrats and Republicans were meeting in the Situation Room today. I have to tell you, the Situation Room is probably the only place where Donald Trump couldn't turn the meeting into a press conference. Or a live press event, right? I'm sure that was probably by design. Hey, boss, why don't we bring this meeting into the Situation Room? There's no reason for them to be in the Situation Room. Okay, this is not a crisis of security necessarily. It has implications for security, of course, but that was an interesting part of it. And of course, the politics of the day dominated by Mitt Romney, the former Massachusetts governor and presidential candidate, of course. Comes out with an op-ed piece in the Washington Post that more or less sets the political world on its heels as he more or less speaks his mind once again about how he feels about the character of the president. And rather than just taking it on the chin, the president responds with a tweet that suggests that he is a flake. Get it? It's just it's nonstop. 2019 feels very much like 2018, 2017, 2016. Let's talk about home. Here was the headline that some people saw this morning in the Providence Journal. I will tell you, I didn't see the speech anyway. The Providence Journal did. I found the speech mundane, cliche-ridden, boring. I thought the wind actually took the sails out of the governor. Hey, Ted may see it differently as well. Here was the coverage from Eyewitness News.
Governor Gina Raimondo and the First Family making their way up the south lawn of the State House on a windy New Year's Day. She and the 4 other statewide officers sworn in for 4-year terms.
To the best of your abilities, according to law. So help you God.
I do.
Congratulations, Governor.
Raimondo using her inaugural address to tout improvements in the economy since she was first sworn in 4 years ago.
We've changed the way we do economic development, changed the way we invest in infrastructure, and changed the way we do job training.
She pointed to free tuition at CCRI and a new program to fix crumbling school buildings and made reference to the Me Too movement.
And our work is certainly not done until women and men have the same economic opportunities and can thrive in workplaces free of harassment.
Raimondo will lay out her policy plans for this year in more detail in her State of the State address, but she did touch on expanding pre-K, protecting the Affordable Care Act, and changing gun laws.
It is time to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Our children's future and lives depend on it.
Yes, yes, they do. Oh, where am I? I'm over here. Eric is here, and he's new at the technical director's day, and we are going to work together, and we're going to get a rhythm in New Year in 2019, and I got the wrong makeup on, and it's all good. It's all good. At least you're here to stabilize
I worked
the entire
yesterday, so
situation.
I'm fine, yeah.
Yeah. First day of work in 2019, left the makeup bag at home, you know? So, oh, they don't do that for you? No, they don't, as a matter of fact. Haven't you, 5 years of television, you haven't figured that out? Good, I got that off my chest, and so now, there. white as a ghost. All right. Happy New Year!
Happy New Year, Dan. Good to see you.
We saw each other in the wind yesterday.
We did. I threw some leaves and trees going by.
I was thinking that she might blow away off that podium.
And her first podium actually went over and broke. One of her aides told me they had 40 pounds of sandbags in her podium, the initial one, and it had this jagged edge in it, so they couldn't use it. They had to switch things out. So it really, I mean, people, it's easy to complain about the weather, but that was it was more heavy wind than I expected. I was a little worried about the cameras and stuff, but we survived.
So these are things that we perfunctorily cover, and I just felt that the content of the governor's speech, wind-aided or abetted or not, was just that, perfunctory. What's interesting, though, about, you put 3 people in a room, they'll see something completely differently. The Providence Journal's headline, the coverage of it, it's, inspirational. I don't know. It felt cliche-ridden to me. I don't know that you have to repeat a lot of what you're going to do in an annual budget address, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think these speeches are hard, these inaugural speeches, because I think everyone's trying to go for the JFK, ask not what you can do, or FDR, Day of Infamy. You have these huge historical moments in the heads of the speechwriters, because we all know they're being written by the speechwriters. But they often, I think, wind up like combining a laundry list of policies, making sure every interest group and every policy and everything was checked off with a little bit of that. But it is what it is. I'm not a theater reviewer. I'll leave it to people on what they think. I don't think I heard anything new from the governor in there. Particularly, she spent the last year campaigning. Anyone who followed her campaign could have predicted what would be in there. Now, on the other hand, I guess I would say at least that is, you don't want a governor who was just reelected to come out with all these policies you didn't expect her to support. So I guess at least you're getting the governor you just voted for, it sounds like.
Your discussion of this reminds me of my pet peeve with ad agency people. I do a lot of consulting of small businesses, whether it be those who advertise here, on the radio, even in my own little company that I run. And I always worry that those who create messaging worry more about the competition of creating messaging than just getting to the authentic message. So the idea that I think you're right on the money. They put a lot of pressure on themselves about how to write these speeches and what the high mark is. Is it the JFK? I just want a level of authenticity. And the question I always ask, and I don't know unless I work with somebody closely, is whether they don't have it. If they don't have it, you can't create it, because it's oxymoronic to suggest that you demand authenticity from somebody who isn't, quote, authentic.
Well, it's also there, and even to really get meta, if we're talking about this, then there's a question of, are people who appear authentic, are they authentic, or are they just very good at performing authenticity, right? Like, I think some of the politicians we think of as the most authentic in the way they come across, you read articles from their aides and people who say, well, actually, they're different behind closed doors, but they're sort of, the way their public persona comes across in a way that feels authentic to people. So that's why sometimes I say the theater critic thing, because I do think it can be so hard to pin down, what's real, what's not. It absolutely matters how public officials strike people. Do they trust them? Do they like to listen to them? Do they come across in a certain way? But I always feel like it's such a personal thing. It's hard for me as a reporter to make broader judgments.
Well, what's important about an inaugural speech? I have to say, with a 55-degree temperature in January, even though the wind was blowing, there were polar plunges.
Tim White did one.
Did he?
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, I did it 1 year.
Well, I don't think it's so gutsy at 55 degrees. We'll have to find White.
You hear that, Tim?
And check him
he
off
won't
on that one. Come on,
right,
man.
Yeah.
Well, I'll check him downstairs. 55 degrees. Come on. But the world was operating. The Bruins were on with the ice, the ice rink in Notre Dame. I mean, the place was. Look, I thought Eyewitness News was very good to the governor On the crowd shots, the
Yeah.
truth is that it was 2/3 empty
I will say
from
I
the
tweeted,
setup.
yeah, I tweeted a photo of what it looked like from my riser. Mostly empty seats. I'm not trying to cover up any.
Mostly, my tweet was mostly only people who had to be there.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
what
I
do
just think
what's the importance of
how
it?
much excitement is there out there among even people who voted enthusiastically, or at least were like glad to vote for, they were happy to have another 4 years of Governor Raimondo. Still, whether it's the governor or three of the other 4 general officers getting sworn in were getting second terms. Only Peter Nerona was new, and the legislature was not changing when the leadership was done later in the day. So I just think when you're it's these grand days, I think they have much more of a pomp and an excitement to them when there is a change, even if you like or dislike it, because there's unknown, there's the uncertainty. How are they going to govern? What's going to happen? We very much know what's going to happen. Governor Raimondo is going to keep being how she is. The lieutenant governor is going to keep being Dan McKee, the treasurer, the secretary of state, the legislative leaders. And I have to think that takes some of the air out of the inaugural day. Versus when someone new is coming in.
Well, that makes sense to me. When we come back, the General Assembly, though, has some moving and shaking. We'll talk about that when we come back. Of course, some say the powers in the General Assembly, they started yesterday as well.
75 representatives and 38 senators sworn into office for the next 2 years. The Senate re-electing Dominic Ruggiero to lead them, and the House re-electing House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello.
My #1 priority will be phasing out the car tax and eliminating it completely.
47 members voted for Mattiello.
Speaker Mattiello has answered my questions and dealt with all of my concerns.
I consider the Speaker to be gender neutral when it comes to dealing with issues.
During the vote, you could hear from inside the chamber protesters chanting against him out in the halls.
Oh, hey, hey, ho, ho, Mattiello's got to go.
19 Democrats voted against the Speaker, part of a vocal opposition mounting since November.
I'm very firm in the belief that he is not ideal for Rhode Island, that he does not care about women.
It is, in fact, that bills aren't making it to the floor for a vote, and that bills, when they come to the floor, particularly in the last few days of the session, they come altered in ways that are often a surprise and a disappointment to us.
We asked Mattiello about that so-called Reform Caucus and their calls for change in the way things are done on Smith Hill.
We will make sure that our rules are fair, promote collaboration, are very inclusive to all, but that there's an appropriate screening process so bad ideas don't go through.
Sounds great.
And I think I am the arbiter of bad ideas. And so what I say goes. I mean, here's what I wonder a lot. When reformists say, the process, if their ideas were being forwarded in the perverted process, would they have a problem?
I think
this is the age-old question, isn't it?
Exactly. The oldest thing in politics to watch is, are people who will people support reforms to the process when it actually harms their legislation? Look at the filibuster. Every time the U.S. Senate switches control, the party that hated the filibuster and was complaining about it says it protects minority rights, it's very important, and the other side says it's being abused, it's being overused. And I think it's the same. Well, I don't want to be overly dismissive. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, to be honest, with people who say they're for reform. Will they support reforms that open things up, even if at times it allows ideas they don't agree with to go further?
Well, this group of 1920-ish seems to be coming out of the locker room with a new season mentality. Yeah. The question will be, are they the New York Giants that go 1-7 to start, or are they the New England Patriots, or are they something in between? The Cleveland Browns that, it's nothing a dumb jock anyway, the analogies, but, at least a team that could go 8-8. Are we going to find come May, June, July, they're hardly recognizable, they've been beaten down, Or are they holding sticks over the Speaker of the House and running that place?
Well,
don't know.
I think, and I don't either, and I think you set it up exactly right, Dan. I think that's the thing to watch. You know, you and I are taping this on Wednesday afternoon. I'm going from here to the State House, actually, because that group has announced a news conference at 3 o'clock where they're going to lay out the changes they want to the House rules that they say will make it fairer to all 75 legislators. I took that as at least one sign they remain organized. They remain able to bring, well, I should say, we'll see how many show up, but if most of those 19, 20 or so self-styled reformers show up, that, you know, that's about a quarter of the House Democratic caucus. That's not an insignificant amount. It's different from the days where you have 2 or 3 kind of gadflies yelling from the sidelines. Now, the Speaker had 47 people voting with him yesterday, but on the other hand, even to get them, he was pretty clear in his speech. Carol Hagan-McEntee swung back to support him for Speaker. He's looking closely at giving her her sex abuse bill that died last year. You know, Representative Maldonado.
And he's making a special hire to investigate sexual harassment charges, or what's he going to call it? A sexual harassment officer?
I haven't talked to him about it yet, and I haven't seen a formal proposal from him. And I know you talked about it with Tara Granahan this morning. You know, but he's working with Chris Blazewski, some kind of office. He himself said he thinks it might be a waste of resources. But you know, clearly that's because, in retrospect, the way that the Cale Keeble situation was handled was not ideal, and they're looking for something. So you know, we've got to see with all that. But I do think it's going to be interesting in the House because you have a measurable block of the House between the Republicans and those reformers who are not in lockstep with the Speaker, even though I'd say all of them are going to be willing to vote with him sometime. So how much does it matter? Does it fade out? That's the thing to watch.
The other thing that's phenomenal about this stuff is if you ask informed taxpayers, voters, viewers of this show, if you watch this show, you probably care about stuff and you pay attention to things. If new rules ought to be established to create more transparency, flexibility, last-minute changes, good ideas, you know, consensus, everyone would say, sure. But the politics ideology that just happens to be attached to those rules reforms probably aren't palatable across the Rhode Island board. So that's the other thing that I find to be interesting about this. Will people in this state give energy to these reformers based on the essence of rules changes, which are hard for people to understand how that matters to them in their daily lives? Will they actually investigate the politics behind rules reform objectives?
Well, you know, but I think it's a fair question. I think this stuff can be arcane. I always say I like to say that the rules bill, where they set the rules of the House and Senate, which they do every 2 years, is probably among the most important and least discussed bills that are passed, because that sets the terms of debate for the next 2 years. People who are critical will say all these lawmakers, they're elected in their districts, they march up to Smith Hill, and within a couple weeks in January, they voted to give all their power that they just won at the election board to the Speaker and his team. So I think, you know, I'd also turn it back on voters, which is, you know, I know you hear direct with the radio and you're out in the world like I am. People complain a lot. Things don't change in Rhode Island. Why is the State House the way it is, et cetera? Well, at some point, you know, voters need to pay attention to kind of how the sausage is made if they want to understand why things end up in a place where they're not happy with it. And, you know, arcane as it is, the rules of the House and the rules of the Senate create kind of the landscape where things can go one way or the other.
And quickly, the Senate had its own little semi-soap opera. This newly elected state senator, Sam Bell, one of two, Senator Nesselbush of Pawtucket being the other. She voted no on the Senate president because she has a process issue as well. Bell actually thinks it's a resume problem for the Speaker. But you, I mean, for the Senate president. Give me 30 seconds of what you thought about that.
Well, I think Sam Bell, I mean, he might be familiar.
Usually we don't pay attention to 2 no votes, by the way.
Yeah, no. I think, well, I think, you know, it was because, you know, Senator Bell, I think he's been on your show, right? Some people might be familiar with him, progressive activist. You know, he was elected in a district in Providence, and I think people want to know, you know, he has always been very outspoken as an activist, and kind of, you know, sometimes activists come up and they get into the legislature, they kind of take a quieter approach, seeing if they can get things done more quietly, and he has come in right away with no interest in making friends with the people in charge of the Senate. I mean, he brought up he sent a news release to reporters detailing Dominic Ruggiero's run-ins with the law in the past with reputed mob figures. I mean, some negative stuff. Now, those are actual stories that have been out there about the Senate president, so it's not that Sam Bell was making things up, but still, you know, the Senate, even more than the House, dissent is rare in the Senate, and public dissent is even rarer in the Senate. So for him to even speak up against Ruggiero is one thing. To go as far as bringing up negative episodes in his past, which he said he declined to speak about on the floor at the request of Senator Ruggiero, was quite a break with how that usually operates. Maybe it's necessary in the Senate, but it's certainly a change.
Yeah, that'll be fun to watch. Ted has a theme. We'll talk about it next.
We won't stop until every Rhode Islander has a shot at a good-paying job. We won't stop until our students are set up to achieve their dreams from pre-K through high school and beyond. Expanding opportunity for all is the only way to ensure that our economy is resilient in the years to come.
All right, so what are the metrics? Whatever. This is why I say we won't stop. Okay. Well, I guess that means at some juncture you will stop. This drives me crazy. The cliche buzz phrases.
Well, that's why you and I aren't speechwriters.
Yeah, right. Anyway, you thought there was a theme. I have 2 minutes. Go.
Over the course of the day, so education, it's always an issue. I'm not claiming that that wouldn't have been discussed in the State House this year, but I think those RICAS tests, the brand new standardized test exam that just came out, which I think you've covered on the show, Dan, the results were weak, not good, and I think if somehow that sort of shook up the debate about education around. People sort of woke up a bit more to like, why are we lagging Massachusetts still so much? A lot of money's being invested, et cetera. Governor Raimondo mentioned it, of course. There's a lot of buzz about what she's thinking for second term with education. Are there going to be personnel changes, et cetera? And then it was mentioned by both Senate President Ruggiero and Speaker Mattiello in their opening day speeches as a key priority for both chambers. And I think both of them said something along the lines of, and we're going to hold the Department of Education accountable on what they've promised. Are they getting it done? Is things working? And so I think K-12 is going to be higher on the agenda this year than we might have predicted even 6 months ago, because those test scores really were sort of a wake-up call to folks that this has been allowed to drag on too long.
From your lips to God's ears, because I asked the question repetitively over the back end of 2018, based on those scores, are we angry? Is there emotion across the state, never mind in our elected bodies, to make some changes here?
Now, what will those changes be? Will they be effective? Will they be? No idea. But just the mere fact that it was mentioned in their speeches in a different way, I think shows there is an intensity around. They must be hearing about it, and they must feel that it's something they need to be seen addressing.
15, 20 seconds. Any major political prediction for the year?
I try to avoid predictions because then they can replay them and show that I was wrong.
Well, I'm not going to keep score.
Someone else might or something. No, I think it'll be interesting to see, how much having the same cast of characters leads to a sameness, and how much are things different up there more than we think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be right back. Awesome job.
Great.
As always.
Nice.
We try to make predictions. I thought I could hook him into a prediction. He never takes the bait. Ted, I'm talking about. But you know what? This notion of New Year and predictions and will there be change and all that kind of stuff, I think we whip ourselves up into a kind of a predictive frenzy. I think our 2019 resolution here ought to be one day at a time, because right now it's all we can count on, right? You have a great night, and thanks for tuning in, and Happy New Year again. We'll see you on the radio, too, tomorrow at 3 on WPRO, and back here tomorrow night. Good night.